Okay, take 3,000. Oh, God. Let's see if this is any better. So as soon as anybody's on, if you could just give me the thumbs up and let me know that it's okay. I'll just hang on a moment. So we're going to be talking, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get this technology sorted. We're going to be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder with a lovely lady in Canada called Monique. So, hi Denise, does that sound better now from my end, Denise? I'm not hearing the echo. Yeah, okay. So, fingers crossed when I bring Monique on now, in a minute, that it will be okay. Hi Claire. Okay, thank you so much for being patient, guys, and sticking with me and coming back again and again. So whilst I just wait for it to show up that Monique's there, she probably is, but I think there's a little delay. Sounds better. Okay, well, let's fingers crossed when we add Monique that we maintain this better sound. That'll be fingers crossed. Okay. Won't let me share my own video from here either, which is a bit annoying, but never mind. So Monique, who I'll be bringing on shortly, is somebody who has suffered with PTSD herself in her past. As you know, I've suffered with anxiety, and that's my thing. I was never diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, for anybody that isn't sure what that is. But it's something that Monique has in her history, but actually has found huge relief from the 3 principles, which, as you know, is what I use on with all of my coaching. Despite being trained as a psychotherapist, it's now solely the 3 principles that I use. And that is basically because it was the thing that changed everything for me, even after years and years of therapy. And so, you know, I use it with others because the results are, well, they just speak for themselves, really. And let's have a look. Monique, if you are there, add. Okay. Should be working. Oh, fingers crossed. Let's have a look.
Okay, there I am.
Yay! Sounds much
Hi.
better.
Good, good.
Yay! Okay. Can you hear me a bit better this time?
I can hear you perfectly now, and you can hear me?
Yeah, great.
So
Woohoo!
I guess we have to use our phones when we do these kinds of things.
We do, yeah. And
Yeah.
I do this every time I have somebody on a live Facebook, and it's only once I've logged in and started that I go, oh shit, I've got to use my phone. And I
Okay.
forget every time. So I can't share it into the other group, which is a shame.
Oh,
So it might take them a bit to catch up. But if not, what I'll do is what I always do is I will share it into the group as soon as it's finished, and people will they'll ask questions and things, and we can go back to them.
okay.
So it'd be great if you could just kind of introduce yourself, let us know a bit about. You've just been saying that PTSD is something that was in your life, and now something that you work to support others, coaching and things like that. So just give us a bit of an insight, that would be helpful.
About myself?
To you, yeah.
Yeah. So I did hear you say before I came on that you had tried a lot of different things and that you found the 3 Ps the most effective. And that's the same situation with me. So I was first diagnosed actually with anxiety. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety. And that's because at the time, post-traumatic stress disorder wasn't really recognized as being something that could be caused by childhood abuse or childhood trauma. Of course, thankfully, that's changed today, but at that time it wasn't. And yet I really fit the diagnosis. And it was only later on that I got diagnosed with chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, and on the severe side. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting that you should say that, actually, because somebody that's on my 1-week course at the moment, I sent her a link to a podcast about post-traumatic stress disorder. It was interesting because she said that she'd never considered that she had that because she always associated with people who'd been in the forces, and that was it.
Yeah, you see, that's it. And what they don't really recognize is when you have trauma, whether it's from childhood or domestic violence, it's the same thing like you're living in a war. It's the same thing, you know. PTSD is a result of experiencing an absolutely overwhelming experience that's beyond your control, and that's it's a response to that.
Yeah. So again, the reason kind of that I thought it would be interesting to talk about PTSD is because a lot of people ask me about it. And more often they come to me originally because of anxiety, but then they sort of say that this is almost like PTSD is then a side effect of that, or they feel like it's an addition, an add-on, or whatever it is. And then they'll come and ask questions, but it's one of those things that with the 3Ps, and again, it'd be interesting to see what your take is on how it worked for you, but with the 3 principles, like people will message me and say, do you deal with OCD? Do you deal with PTSD?
Yeah.
Do you deal with generalized anxiety? Do you deal with this? And I don't even need to read it to say, yes, I do, because actually they're all dealt with in the exact same way in terms of the 3 principles, because what we're really talking about is how we're experiencing everything day to day, minute to minute through our thinking.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
There was another, was it, I think it was maybe yesterday or the day before, I had another question from someone about it. Just before I forget, actually, anyone that's watching, I've just logged onto my computer and it's not doing anything it shouldn't, which is good, because I'm going to share it in the bigger group, because there's a huge group, a mental health group based in the UK, who I do live videos for every now and then. And I did promise that I would share it in there, so I'm just doing that. If I look a bit distracted, that's what I'm doing. And if anyone does have any questions at all about PTSD or about anxiety or anything like that, feel free to just kind of pop them in there as we go. As you know, I'm quite laid back with these things. I'll just flip from one thing to the other, as people are used to me doing. So, as you've said, you're in a way, I think a lot of people that come across these 3 principles tend to go through a relatively similar journey, and it's quite often the end of the road for them. As in, tried everything. I do a presentation locally, and I do it online as well, and it starts out by me telling them a bit about my history and my background, and one of the slides at the beginning is literally a slide full of all different things of literally, and the amount of money, the amount of time, the amount of stress I've undergone to try and fix myself over the years.
Totally. And that was me. I think I have like 15 or maybe more. Some of the ones that you mentioned, I did them. Really. Yeah. I mean, we'll do anything. We'll do just about anything to try to feel better.
Yeah. Because, and why wouldn't we? Because as human beings, we don't like the discomfort. We don't want to be restricted in living our lives and all that sort of thing. So of course we become almost desperate to fix. And then the thing with that is that trying so hard, sorry, 1 second, I've managed to show it, just 1 second. Trying so hard to fix is again, often sometimes keeping people in the stress and in the cycle. And one of the things I found was, ironically, the thing that changed it all for me was the most simple thing I've ever come across, in a way. In a way, it was free, it was easily accessible, there wasn't, 10 different strategies that I had to abide by in order to get relief. It was almost like just reading a book or a story and going, oh.
Yeah, it was the simplest thing I ever did. And it was the most unexpected surprise. It happened so quickly, when I had been suffering with these symptoms for decades. And then to just see it kind of dissolve it's crazy. It sounds miraculous, but it's natural. And back to what you were saying about how we all want to feel better. I think that that's the innate part of us that knows that the way we're experiencing life is not the way it's supposed to be. There's this part of us that's saying it knows that, peace is really our innate. It's the way that we are created to be. Yes, default. That's the word I'm looking for. And so it's like we're looking for it because we know that that's the place that we should be at. Not all the time, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's our default.
Yeah, and knowing that when we are overwhelmed and things do happen, that we will naturally reset. And I think the
Yeah.
thing, again, for me that I used to always struggle with is if I was feeling really anxious, I never trusted or believed that I would reset. I always believed, because of everything I've been through and even training as a therapist, that, okay, well, in order to get out of this hole that I'm in at the moment, I have to do all of these things that I know might work, might not work, but I've just got to do
Mm-hmm.
something. I can't just sit back and feel like this.
Yeah.
Um, and that's
Yeah.
the difference now with the principles is once you start to understand them, and you also
Yeah.
just realize there isn't anything that you need to do. It's about understanding more about thought and how it all works.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say to people? Because I know, I get a lot of messages, and I know that some people that watching this will be thinking, well, and this is why I wanted you on as well, because I've not had a diagnosis of PTSD. So I can't categorically say to them that I had PTSD and the three principles changed that for me. So I can't say that. And you can. So but I can imagine people watching this will be saying, well, it can't have been that bad if it got
Mm-hmm.
away, because people strongly believe, like I did about anxiety, that once
Yeah.
you've got it and it's not going
Yeah.
anywhere, and you've
Yeah.
just got to live with it, you've got to
Yeah.
manage it, all of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. 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 And it was the same for me. I mean, like I said, when I was diagnosed, the score came severe and chronic. So that's pretty bad, which just meant that the symptoms were interfering with my daily life, which they were. They were. I was triggered all day long. I talk about how I would race out of the house, and things don't trigger me anymore. I don't have a response to them. But what's very interesting about all of this, I want to say, is it's not that you're going to understand the three principles or understand, this understanding of how our psychology works. It's going to make you not have PTSD, and it's going to make you not have anxiety. It's not like a prescription. Here, do this and you'll feel better. It's more, as we know, it's not a prescription, it's a description. And when you understand the description of how it actually works, that's when all the thinking starts to fall away, and you rest more, and you take more comfort in the design instead of being terrified by what's going on. Like you were saying, I think you were saying, like your symptoms, and then you're trying this and that, which is really just keeping it in place.
Yeah. I had somebody who's done on my course this week message me and said, I can't really explain like what's happening, but I'm just feeling better.
I
And I don't
read
know.
that. It's
And I'm
beautiful.
like, and this happens all the time though. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. You don't really need to know why. But her words were actually her words that she used, and this is, I think, explains it really well. She said, I just have this knowing that things are going to be all right.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of what happens when exploring these principles, is that you just start to know. So I have examples all the time where I had an earache yesterday, and one of the biggest triggers for me with anxiety was whenever I was ill in any way, because I always had to be 100% on form, and if I wasn't, I couldn't control everything, and I didn't like it. So with illness, any physical illness with me would then bring anxiety on, whatever it was, doesn't matter.
Okay.
And I had a bit of earache yesterday, and this is what really signifies the difference for me is, so I had the earache and I felt it, and I instantly went to thinking, oh no, like what if this gets really bad? Like what if it's so bad? And in my head I'm thinking, what if it's so bad that I can't get rid of the pain and it's unbearable, and it was all the what ifs.
Yes.
And but the difference is now I go to that, and then after a few seconds I kind of laugh to myself, because something just goes, what? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
realizing that the earache was not so bad. It was a little twinge,
Mm-hmm.
but it felt bad because in my head, I was in the place in my head of how it could get really, really bad.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I had a similar experience where it was a few weeks ago where I had it's called gastro. Well, I woke up in the middle of the night with a sudden wave of nausea, and I was on the floor, And I mean, I felt as sick as you could possibly feel. My body is, I'm drenched. My body's on the floor, the cold floor. And then suddenly I realized I knew what was going on. And I knew that if I say, oh, I feel so sick, how long is this going to go on? If this continues, I knew I was just going to build it up. So instead, I was almost like just being with the symptom and not adding one little stitch more to it. And then it just naturally, you know, got better. And, you know, so that's really understanding about this gift of thought and how we experience our thinking in the moment.
Yeah. And with also regards to PTSD, somebody asked me recently, and again, this is like really quite a common question. They'd experienced trauma, and I won't go into what it was, but they'd experienced trauma, and they're learning about these 3 principles on the course. And one of the things was about, because I'm saying actually thoughts are not true, okay, so they're not real. And so this person's saying to me, but actually the thoughts that are popping into my head and the images did happen, so they are real.
Yes.
And the thing is with this is sometimes quite hard to explain to people without sounding a bit harsh sometimes. But it's kind of like, we're not taking away from the experience that has happened. It has happened. And of course it was real. You know, you've got thoughts about it and it happened. It was something that physically happened, but it isn't happening now. And I think that's sometimes the sticking point for people, is that they find it sometimes difficult to separate the two, because it's kind of like, well, the thoughts are coming and they can be really quite disturbing and distressing. And then, but actually in the moment, getting so caught up in that thought because they don't naturally understand how thought works is kind of keeping them there. Yeah. But I think it's important to just say that, you know, for people just dipping into this who have experienced trauma and have PTSD as a result of that, you know, I'm not saying, oh, it's just thought, forget about it. I understand it can be extremely difficult.
Yes.
But
and
go on.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just going to say, you're pointing to a very, very important thing, which this is what you're alluding to, is that we don't want to minimize. And that's what you're saying, definitely. Because with trauma, people have been minimized. They haven't been heard. Their experience, you know, they haven't had a voice. And so, you know, I know myself, when I first came into this understanding, I was like, I argued a lot. I'm like, no, you don't know what I know, because I have a lot of training. Besides being a social worker, I have a lot of trauma-informed training. So I know about trauma. And I didn't want to feel minimized. Like, what do you mean? It's, you know, you don't understand what I know. But as you start to understand how the system works, how we're created, how we're designed, just how we work, when we understand that what's happening, it's not that we're thinking in the moment, and we're having a memory. And when we're having the memory, it's coming to life and we're feeling it. And it could be the same, we're thinking about the same memory that we had back then, which was horrific, which could have been painful, all kinds of things. And we're experiencing it. But when we know that we're experiencing it because it's happening now, in real time now, but it's not the past. It's happening now because we're thinking about it and it's coming to life in our body, because that's how it works. What happens is we often think that we think more, that it's, no, it's the past that's happening now. There's almost like, and so I have to do something about that because it's the past intruding now, happening now. But what is actually happening is you are having a memory of the past in the present moment. And it's coming to life, you're feeling it, but it will settle down. And when the power is in knowing that you're completely safe, what's happening is just a normal, it's a normal experience to having a memory. You're going to experience it. So, yeah.
And I think with whether it be for PTSD or anxiety or whatever it is, the key, and certainly the key and the changing point for me with all of this was, and a lot of people that I talked to, is starting to become comfortable with that discomfort as horrible as it is. And it kind of links in with what you just said there about, well, actually, you know, knowing that you're safe. But when we're so lost in thought, it's like we forget that we're safe, and we don't trust that, you know, we get scared and we just get carried away with that, rather than just kind of recognizing, okay, so I'm having thoughts about what happened, that's creating me feelings that are uncomfortable, and, you know, knowing that it will pass. But I think that's the beauty of these 3 principles, is that over time people just start to get the sense of actually it's going to pass.
Yeah, definitely. What was I going to say about that? The experience of I think the difference was, I remember before I knew the 3 Ps, I mean, I used to tell myself, don't worry, you're safe, it's okay. And it meant zip. Yeah. I could say it till I was blue in the face. But now, if I was to say it, which I don't need to say it, but if I did, because I understand what is happening. I didn't understand what was happening. I did not understand. That provides just a huge sense of safety, psychological safety. You know that your system is reliable, that you know, it's going to go through that stage, and it's you know, it's coming to life, and then it's going to be fine. That's all that's happening. Memories coming to life in your body.
Yeah, because what happens again with all of this stuff and anxiety is that I kind of sometimes try and explain it, it's almost like layers of thoughts. So we can't control thoughts, and we can't stop us having thoughts. You know, even if it's not things that have happened, just scary thoughts about what might happen, you know, it can be just as intrusive. And it's about knowing that they can go as quick as they come. But what often people fall into the trap of doing when they start to feel scared is going into, right, what do I need to do to get rid of this?
Exactly. Yeah.
So as soon as I was having any anxious thoughts, what I would do historically is go, oh no, it's back, it's here. How do I get rid of this? Right, okay, so maybe I need to do this, maybe I need to do that. And I would just interfere so much with it. And that in itself is creating a whole load of anxious thinking.
Totally. And that's the same thing with the PTSD. So if I would get a traumatic, everything would stop if I suddenly had a flashback. Everything would stop. Okay, what do I have to do now? Do I have to process this? Or maybe this is my inner child and I need to comfort her. Or I mean, it would go on and on and on and on and on and on. And it would just keep me in a state of being dysregulated because I was keeping it in place. I was making it bigger.
Yeah. Someone's just asked a question here, and I'm just going to answer this. It's not always a memory, though. I have anxious dreams which I know are triggered by the past, but I don't relive the events. But how do you factor for it coming through in dreams in this way? Well, in a way, a dream is a good example, because you can't control the thoughts you have when you're having a dream. And people don't even try to, because they just go, oh, it's a dream. Like, I can't do anything about it. But actually, having a dream is just the same as being awake in the day and wandering around. That's how our thoughts work in the day. So we can't help random thoughts. We can't help thinking. Right. We can't control any of that stuff. But yet somehow when it's a dream, people will often let themselves off the hook a bit, because they go, oh, it's just a dream. Whereas again, in the day, if they have a thought that's an anxious thought and they don't like it, it's kind of like, why am I thinking like that? I shouldn't be thinking like that. Rather than when we have a dream, we just kind of go, oh, it was just a dream. Whereas this person is talking about dreams being uncomfortable. But it works in the same way. So just knowing it's just thoughts that are coming in a dream, that there's nothing you can do about that, and that they will pass. Because what can then sometimes happen is people will try and control the thoughts they had in the dream throughout the rest of the day by going, oh, I hope I don't dream that again tonight, and I hope I don't think that doesn't happen again, and that's not very nice. And that's, again, holding on to those thoughts. And then you're less likely to have anxious, you know, if you go to bed after a day of anxious thinking, it's likely you're going to have dreams with anxious thoughts.
Can I just say something to her?
Yeah, of course.
To the question. And I would just say that, because she's saying, you know, I'm thinking, you know, some of these dreams have to do with the past. It could be. It could be that you're having some memories that are coming through in your sleep. You know, there's nothing to do about it. It's just maybe, you know, little fractions coming up, little pieces. and it is what it is. I think we all have that, you know, sometimes.
And another thing is, you know, it's interesting because I'm talking to somebody here with you that has had relief from 3 principles, as I have. And I can remember when I first started exploring these principles and looking into these principles. I talk about this in my coaching group, people in there that have been learning about it for a while. And we can so easily just say, it's just thought and it will pass, and we make it sound so like easy. And I can remember listening to people in the early days about these 3 principles thinking, they have no clue. Like, they're saying it so easily that they clearly have never been as stressed as I've been, because it's not that easy, you know?
Yes,
but that again is just about the resistance, because,
yes,
you know, we're at different places and in different levels. And the thing that I can't remember who told me this originally, but someone just said, if there's something in it that makes some sense to you, just keep looking in that direction. Just keep exploring it. You don't have to fully commit and believe, and, you know, but just if there's something you hear in it, just keep exploring what that is.
Yeah, yeah. I remember being told that because like I said at the beginning, I had a whole bunch of questions. Like, this didn't go with the stuff that I learned about trauma. And I was told would I be willing to put whatever I know to the side and just have an open mind and heart? And I did. And that's when everything changed.
Yeah. Well, I had to completely change my whole career. You know, like,
I bet.
Trained my whole life to be a psychotherapist, trained hypnotherapy, NLP, and I don't use any of that now. Like, but in a way, it made me the person that I am today, and I'm grateful for it. But it's quite funny, really.
I was just going to say, in my case with trauma survivors, I would start where they're at. So many trauma survivors need validation, and you know, because like I said before, they don't have a voice, or they've never had a voice. So to be able to share and know that they're seen and they're heard. So there is a place for that. And when they're ready, that's when I would go into the direction of the...
Well, that's the other thing that I like about the 3 principles, though, in that there aren't really any rules. So people will say to me, should I be doing this? I'm on medication, should I come off it? Or should I try medication? Or what about if I do this? What if I do that? And I don't, even though I know that if they just keep learning about the 3 principles, they'll get there. If in the meantime they want to do any of those things, then do it, because that's the other part that it's about. It's just trusting your gut instinct. And so sometimes I'll have coaching clients who come to me to talk about the 3 principles, but actually want to spend a session just offloading. It's like, go for it. Like, that's about trusting what you want to do in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone's put here, after 18 years, I constantly wake from the dreams and nightmares. My brain trained itself to protect me and stop the nightmares, leaves me exhausted. Yeah, that's, you know, it's hard. But if you haven't watched the half-an-hour video that's on my page, have a look at it, because I talk a bit in there about the messages that you're sending to your brain, because you're in a habit. I mean, sometimes habit feels like too less of a word to use because it's so traumatic, but it's a habit that's formed.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny. I remember when one of the coaches I had a long time ago was when I didn't realize I had PTSD, and they told me that anxiety was a habit. Boy, was I insulted. Didn't feel like a habit.
That's the thing. No, it doesn't. And it's that's the thing. The word almost doesn't seem important or big enough to describe how we can feel in those moments. But again, you know, I'm at a place now where I see it is a habit, like, and I'm okay with that, because, you know, no, you're right. It's funny, isn't it, how we... Here, PTSD in the case of a soldier is PC softening horrific event, World War I. The shell shock, people didn't like that, so they then became battle fatigued or operationally fatigued. Then it becomes PTSD to further soften it. In my opinion, it takes away from the help that people really need. You know, it's a bit of a difficult one around help. And I don't know what it's like in Canada, but here in the UK, like, there isn't the resources, there isn't enough help. There isn't enough, you know, there isn't stuff for people to access more often than not, and that again is what keeps people suffering for so long in a way, is that there isn't. What's it like where you are?
It's the same thing, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so someone has put here, I do have PTSD. What happened to me could happen again. I spend my days trying to prevent it. Can't seem to get out of my head. Thoughts, yes, but also could be realistic. So frustrated. So one of the things I want to say about that is, I don't know what it is that you're talking about, that what might happen again. So I can't, I'm not, and it doesn't matter. We don't need to know that. But anything could happen to any of us. And sometimes, you know, so for example, I always remember actually speaking to somebody whose parents had been in a plane crash. And they had a fear of flying, no surprise. And yet, when people have a fear of flying, people try and rationalize it and help them by saying, it's a very safe way it's a very safe mode of transport. The chances of you actually having a crash are very slim, blah, blah, blah. But actually then someone whose immediate family had been in a plane crash and died, that didn't feel so insignificant and far removed from them. So you can see why actually their thoughts could feel much stronger and much more intense because of their history. But actually that client, as frustrating as this may be for him, was still no more at risk of having a plane crash than I was. But yet it didn't take over my day to day because I wasn't having thoughts about it. And so even though people are often in fear of stuff that's happened and may happen again, and I can't sit here and say it will never happen, because none of us can say that. But the other thing about understanding more about thought is that we don't need to sit waiting every minute for it to happen through our thinking. Because as you were saying before, when we are thinking about it, it creates those feelings and that distress. It's almost like it is happening every day, all day.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, that pretty much sums up what PTSD is, because you're thinking about the past and you're feeling it. You know, I thought about mine all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone's put here, I don't talk about my struggles with anyone of fear of being weak. Well, again, you know, Lee, though, I can get that. You know, I don't mind admitting, I tell people this. When I first trained as a psychotherapist, I trained as a psychotherapist because I felt like I was completely broken and needed fixing. And I was too embarrassed to just say to people I was just going to go and have therapy. So it was like my inroad to go, well, I know what I'll do. Train as a therapist. I'll suss it all out then, and then I won't get weak.
Yeah.
And whereas now it's kind of like the opposite. I'm like, oh, if that's being weak, then I like being weak, you know?
Yes.
So again, understanding more about this, you'll probably care less about the idea of whether it's seen as weak or not, because again, you'll realize that that's just thought, that's just something that you're telling yourself, which isn't necessarily true, because I certainly don't see it as weak, you know, so my perception is very different to yours. Somebody's put here, I haven't seen the pre-video in time. Can you briefly articulate the 3 principles? Okay.
Oh boy.
No, it's very difficult to do it like this, because it's a conversation we could have forever, ever and ever and a day. So I would advise that you go and watch that video, and then if you've got any questions, ask me. But basically it's talking about mind, thought and consciousness. So we're talking about kind of our mind, our wisdom, gut instinct, whatever you want to call it, and trusting that we are innately well. Okay, we have the capacity to be okay no matter what is thrown at us, and we know what to do just at the right times. But then we have thought that can kind of very much get in the way of that, and if we end up in a big thought storm in our head, it's like we can't see that wisdom, that gut sort of innateness really very clearly anymore because we're lost in thought, but it hasn't gone anywhere. So a lot of what we're doing with coaching these 3 principles is getting you back to seeing that even in the darkest of days, that light is still there. It just doesn't appear like it is to you. And then the consciousness part, again, we could talk about this forever, but that's about like you bringing your thoughts to life.
Yeah.
You know, so we can all have thoughts that are kind of, every single thought that comes into your head is neutral until you give it energy and you give it life based on your experiences and all that kind of thing. So that's it in a nutshell. So someone's put here, I've had PTSD for the past 7 years. It feels like an ongoing battle. I've thrived. Lots of different ways of coping. Oh, it must be tried. Lots of different ways of coping. Meditation, psychology, medication, counselling. I feel every day is a struggle. When do I sleep? When I sleep, I have nightmares. I have generalised anxiety. Okay, so Monique, sounds familiar, maybe.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, Julie, it's draining and it's a cycle, and I don't blame you, and this isn't a criticism, because both myself and Monique have said at the beginning of this that we've both been here too, that you're trying so hard and missing actually what you are capable of underneath all of this. And my best advice would be to watch that video, watch anything you can about the 3 principles, so that you start to realise that there is a much easier way than how you're doing it at the moment, because it's exhausting. Doing all of that stuff is exhausting.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just say that, because of what you're experiencing, you may come to the conclusion and think that you are not okay, or that you're broken because of whatever's happened. And I want to let you know you are not broken. You work perfectly fine, and you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay.
And that, again, I said this at the beginning, but that's really why I wanted to bring you on here, because if the only thing anybody hears on this live call or is watching the recording that suffers with PTSD and believes that it's something they're going to have to live with for the rest of their life, and that they're completely messed up and fixed, is like, just even if it gives them the slightest little bit of hope in hearing that somebody has recovered. And I've recovered from severe anxiety. Do I get anxious? Yeah, of course. I'm human. Do I lie in bed at night worrying about the next time it will be, or if it's going to ruin my life? No, because I know that isn't going to be the case.
Yes, exactly.
That's different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so huge. That's so huge, and I think that I don't know how to put it, but just that I've rediscovered a love for our design, and I have faith in it where I didn't before, because it was doing all these crazy things. So I thought, when it was just working exactly the way that it is supposed to.
Yeah, and that thing I remember my kind of words almost being like realizing, oh, actually life is not meant to be difficult. It's not meant to be hard work. And sometimes when I find myself in a thought storm, that will just occur to me, and like, I don't need to make this so difficult. Like, this does not need to be this difficult. I'm creating my experience of life right in this moment that it's difficult, it's hard work, I'm sick of it, I'm tired of that. Actually, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be like that.
But what's really hard for trauma survivors is they've been through a war, whether it's a physical war with the veterans, or whether it was a sexual abuse, physical abuse, childhood abuse, like a war. And then what happens with PTSD is it's a reliving of it. So you feel like you've never escaped it. I remember in my diary as a child writing, when I grow up, I'm going to live in a home and there'll be peace and quiet. And though there was peace and quiet, inside I was still living in a war. I didn't understand. And that's the sad thing about PTSD, is that it's you're continuing, experiencing. But when you begin to understand what's really going on, that's where the freedom starts.
Yeah. And even that word trauma, I can remember being in like a training group once, talking about trauma. And this might sound really kind of naive, but at the time, I think most people at some stage experience trauma, whatever that looks like. I think a lot of, a high percentage of people. And I can remember, thinking, going into that training, believing that trauma was either you had to be in a house that was burning down, or, you know, put into hospital through being so badly beaten, or like, to me it was just these things that I perceived to be big things, when actually, you know, things that could be perceived as smaller but constant and continuous and no let up, you know, is just as traumatic. Hang on. Living around bullies don't help. Calling you mad and all sorts of nasty names make you feel like they must be right and I must be mad. So, you know, yeah, that's really hard, because again, what's happening there is not only are you believing your own thoughts that's creating a really uncomfortable experience, it's like you're believing other people, what other people are saying as well. You know, they're saying them, and then it you know, you probably hear it that often that it starts to, you know, that's what happens with thoughts. We start to believe them, particularly when we're stressed anyway. We start to believe things as true. And so, you know, start feeling like we're mad. I can remember thinking, I'm going mad, I'm going to go mad. And actually, there was so many things happening in my life showing that I wasn't mad and I wasn't going to go mad, but I couldn't see them. I didn't look for them. In fact, it sounds daft, but I wasn't interested in them. I was only interested in the bits that I didn't like and I wanted rid of.
Yeah, exactly. You know, for sure. Yeah, I didn't see that I was going to university. I didn't see that I was working as a social worker. All I saw was the trauma and the feeling stuck, and the, you know, it's true. It's just how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap it up then, anyone that is watching this, you can download that video. It's just pinned to the top of my page. I'll share this again, and I'll share Monique's details as well, because you've got a Facebook page as well, haven't you?
Yes, I do.
So go over and give her a like and a follow as well. Hang on, there's another question here. I'll come back to this in 1 second, Claire, before we finish up. And if you're watching this on the recording and you do have any questions, please do feel free to ask, because, you know, as you know, I'll always come back to you anyway on the page. I know it's Christmas the next few days, but I'm kind of a bit addicted to my little community online, so I will be checking in. But I see it as a healthy addiction. It's not bothering me. I love it.
Good.
So here, I'll just cover this before we go. So PTSD can be very common amongst bereaved parents, and I've met many deep and complicated grief who are torn between wanting to feel better and not wanting to, because it validates the significance of their loss and trauma. Yeah, and it's not surprising, is it? You know, as a parent myself, it would be my absolute worst nightmare. It's something that, even to think about it, it's not happened to me, it makes my skin crawl. And this is an example, Claire, what you're talking about is that when, you know, it's like saying, okay, so that someone who's lost a child, learn the 3 principles and your life will be amazing. No, I don't think anyone would ever get over losing a child.
Yeah.
But it's about, well, how we live the rest of our life in complete distress and, you know, feeling stuck and overwhelmed all the time. There's no way that they're not going to go through stages of overwhelm. Of course they will. That's always going to be there. But it would maybe help with things like the confusion of, you know, not wanting to move on because it doesn't validate the loss and all that sort of stuff. That's where it would come into its own and help in that sense. Because there's obviously going to be a lot of resistance there to people moving on with their lives, because in a way they're not moving on with the same life. It's a different life. And that will take some change and some shifting. So yeah, that, you know, it must be awful, horrendous. And again, this is a time of year now around holidays and Christmas where I get a lot of questions about grief and people that have lost loved ones. And interestingly, I did a little post in our private coaching group yesterday, because what was so lovely is people have been sharing and posting and telling me what's different this Christmas to last Christmas. And it's things like Christmas shopping isn't stressful anymore because I'm not busy. Like, they don't care that there's crowds. They don't worry about having a panic attack in the queue or anything like that. So on the practical level, lots of nice changes. And then also more about, you know, people that have always seen Christmas as a time where they get sad because, you know, maybe they've lost a loved one around that time of year, or it's stressful, or all these stories that are created around this time of year. And what was lovely is one of them was kind of saying, you know, that they really miss their mum at Christmas, because it was around that, you know, missing loved ones at that time is really understandable. But rather than, and this is kind of how she puts it, which was really nice, is it's okay for her to feel sad about that and to miss her mum. But what she doesn't do now is have the whole following dialogue of, therefore I hate Christmas, therefore I want this to end really quickly and be over with. Like, that's all the stuff that now she's realised she doesn't need to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay, so I'll leave it there. As I say, I'll share and I'll put your details on as well, Monique, and then maybe we can get together again at some point and
sure. I'd love that.
Great.
It was nice talking to you.
And you. And sorry about the technical issues in the beginning.
That's okay. That's fine. Okay. All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.